Christianity is a great world religion that has to re-examine the anti-Semitism in its most important documents. Now, if that is so sacrilegious, I want to quote something to you from someone who is an expert in the New Testament. Our Jewish people have been persecuted, abused, expelled, and even killed for rejecting a counterfeit message of a counterfeit Christ preached by a counterfeit church. And there is blood on the hands of that church. That same author also wrote, this church, or rather this man-made, politically oriented, sometimes corrupt religious institution became so contaminated that when John Hus exposed the sins of his fellow clergymen, he was burnt at the stake. Whatever I feel about my esteemed opponent this evening, the author of those words, Dr. Michael Brown, is a New Testament scholar. Now, so when you say that there was a contamination and a perversion in the church, perhaps it started with some errant editors who were very anti-Semitic and decided to glorify Pilate at the expense of the Jews. But what is sad, ladies and gentlemen, and especially if you're a devout Christian, what is truly sad is that the net outcome of Matthew 27, where Pilate literally washes his hands of responsibility for the death of Christ, and the Jews say his blood be upon us and upon our children, which, by the way, is so implausible, because number one, Matthew said that the Jews had welcomed Jesus excitedly just 5 days earlier, and secondly, how many parents really stand there and say, come and curse my kids? You know, come and curse my children forever and ever. But the net outcome of those verses is to make Jesus the ally, not of the poor downtrodden Jews who simply fought Rome because they didn't want to be pagans, because they didn't want a statue of Jupiter in their temple, because they didn't want a statue of Caesar in the Galilee. The sum total of those verses is to make Jesus the ally of Pontius Pilate, one of the most murderous and cruel people of all time. Does anyone here want to be associated with Saddam Hussein? And if there were an American intelligence official who someone accused of Saddam Hussein having saved his life, wouldn't we immediately think, whoa, what a traitor? Doesn't this paint Jesus as a traitor to his people? So nobody gains from this. And you know, the biggest losers of all of this lie that the Jews killed Jesus, the biggest losers of all are Christians. Because there is no understanding the historical Jesus without understanding the Jewish Jesus. So if you are alienated from his Hebraic roots, you are alienated from any understanding of the founder of your faith. And no man, as far as I have seen thus far, makes that argument more eloquently than Michael Brown. In several of his books, but especially in his book on anti-Semitism. But here is the problem that I still have. Oh, by the way, just to show you that there were major changes, this is just one example, famous example. In 2 Corinthians, Paul himself writes that when he was in Damascus, quote, the governor under King Aretas guarded the city of Damascus in order to seize me, but I was let down in a basket through a window in the wall, and I escaped his hand. So Paul says that the pagan king of Syria wanted me dead because I was subversive. Look at how the story is retold, the exact same story in Acts chapter 9, verse 22. Again, here is the editors, the Pauline Luke, they say that Luke wrote the book of Acts. But Saul increased all the more in strength and confounded the Jews who lived in Damascus by proving that Jesus was the Christ. When many days had passed, the Jews plotted to kill him. But his disciples took him by night and let him down over the wall, lowering him in a basket. The original story by Paul is the pagan king who is a vassal of Rome, King Aretas, wants me dead. As soon as it's rewritten, ta-da! It's the Jews who want him dead. Well, surprise, surprise! Then we have a similar story in Mark chapter 12, verse 28, where Jesus is teaching, and Sadducees ask him a question. He gives a good response. So this is what it says. And one of the scribes, the Pharisees, comes up and heard them disputing with one another, and seeing that Jesus answered them well, it's a very positive story, he said, Master, which commandment is the greatest of all? So Jesus said, Shema, love your God with all your heart, all your soul. And the scribe said to him, you are right, teacher. You've truly said that he is one and there is no other but he. Very warm relationship between Jesus and the Pharisees. Jesus ends the exchange by saying, you are not far from the kingdom of heaven. Look at how the exact same story is retold in Matthew chapter 22, verse 33. The crowd heard Jesus and they were astonished at his teaching. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, now it's already contentious. They came together. Now they're plotting. The Pharisees are always plotting against Jesus. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. It's the exact same story. Gone is the whole friendly exchange. Now the rabbis are in a debate trying to prove that Jesus is an ignoramus. This is clear-cut editing of earlier stories, especially because we know Mark was the first gospel and Matthew came after. This is a clear-cut editing just to make the rabbis look bad. As I said, the charge that Jews wanted dead, or the Pharisees wanted Jesus dead for blasphemy, as is made in Matthew chapter 27, verse 63, then the high priest said to Jesus, are you the Son of God? And this is what Jesus says. Jesus said to him, you have said so. But I tell you, from now on you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of power, coming on the clouds of heaven. What did the high priest do when he heard this? The high priest tore his clothes and said, he's blasphemed, we don't need any witnesses, time to put him to death. Now here's the problem. Son of Man, Ben Adam, is one of the most common expressions for prophets. In fact, if you go to Israel, it's arguably the most common expression. Ben Adam means son of man, Adam. Adam was man and I'm his son. I'm a Ben Adam. As far as wanting to be at the right hand of God, I will say outright right now, there's a lot of religious Jews here, they can stone me for blasphemy. I hope that after my 120 years, I am at the right hand of God. I plan to be at the right hand of God. Blasphemy? It's a virtuous aspiration. What blasphemy? I mean, do you understand how upsetting this is to Jewish scholars when they read this? You are put to death for blasphemy only if you curse God. If anything, when the authors of the New Testament put in Matthew and Mark that Jesus' last words were Keli, Keli, lama sabachthani, which is a misquotation of Psalms 22, my God, why have you forsaken me? Now that's blasphemy. But saying you want to be close to God, I want to be close to God. Kill him! Bring out the executioner, kill him. This never happened. The real reason he was put to death was the one given so clearly in Luke chapter 23, verse 2. The Sadducees say to Pilate, quote, we found this fellow perverting the nation and forbidding to give tribute to Caesar, saying that he himself is Christ, a king. Pure and simple. Jesus was put to death because he claimed to be the Jewish king. End of story. The Romans had abolished the Jewish monarchy. If you challenge Roman authority, they put you to death real quick, just like in modern Iraq. No difference. Saddam will tolerate a lot. But if you say I'm the king of Iraq, you're a dead man. Period. That's what happened. That's the story. And it's time we got back to the truth of that story. And a final word. I really have come, since the debate that we had 2 years ago, me and Mike Brown, to respect his authentic love for God. To respect even the people who run Chosen People Ministries. There's a lot of anti-missionaries here today who are going to say to me, you know, don't praise these people. But I believe that their godly intention is authentic. It's just so misguided. Why do I have to be a Christian to be loved by God? You mean you love me on your terms? You mean I have to become you in order for God to love me? The black man has to become a white man? I don't believe in spiritual racism. I am proud to be a Jew because we proselytize no one. Because we believe that that Christianity is a great world faith. I revere Christianity. I actually wrote in an essay just 2 days ago that evangelical Christians are arguably the greatest force for good in America today. They raise good kids. They don't indulge in a misogynistic culture that degrades women. They raise kids to love marriage and not just to love dating. They support Israel. They also supported the removal of Saddam Hussein, Pontius Pilate, and I hope that he and both of them rot in hell. Thank you.